Hello and welcome to the D365 Insights Podcast, brought to you by Sourcing Connect. I can't quite believe it, but today is episode 19 and we are interviewing Vikki Szymanski, Business Design and Strategy Lead. Vikki and I have met quite recently through a mutual connection, which is how I love meeting people. And this episode is 1,000 tabs open inside the mind of a transformation leader. So, Vikki, as I said, we've met recently. You actually started out in law. How did that journey lead you into tech and transformation?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. On paper, it sounds a bit of a crazy one, doesn't it? Law to tech, and that's what I
Yeah.
get from a lot of people. Like, how did that happen? But actually, it's quite natural when I explain it. So, yes, I was in law for 7 years. I was working at a large retail bank in their corporate division and the commercial division, working on a number of regulatory programs. But as a consequence of that, I started to understand how the tech systems worked. I think on day one, I was shown how a system worked. I expected just to be able to hand them some terms and conditions that would track change ready to just be implemented for the next set of regulations, wondering why they needed it so far in advance. And then was pointed out the complexities of how the systems worked and actually how you got something from start to finish. Whereas where my previous roles, I'd been at law firms. So you gave your advice, it went off. You didn't necessarily see it implemented. From that, I think because I was so curious, I was asking the technical guys and the tech teams, why do you do things like this? Or like, help me understand what you do, because that'll help me understand, be a better lawyer for you. Um, And over time, I ended up becoming an SME in those systems on the business side and the go-to person, not just from a legal point of view, but actually from a business point of view. It was go speak to Vikki because she knows that system inside and out. And actually, she may point out that there's something in the business side that needs changing that's not legal, but we need to go and speak to marketing or we need to go and speak to operations. Um, and from that, I think I really enjoyed not only the tech side and seeing how things worked and how you could see a program from start to finish, but actually really enjoyed that whole stakeholder management piece, working and looking at operations, looking at process, looking at people and how things actually evolved over time. So I found myself being offered a role outside of legal into the tech area as a business analyst. And from there, it just snowballed really, Sarah. So I did business analyst into project manager into head of some systems. Um, then as we adapted into the agile space, it was product owner and product manager and scrum master and all of those things into becoming a transformation leader, where I started advising on strategic business initiatives and actually showing how tech can enable the business transformation and how people, processes and systems can work better with tech. So a lot of those skills were also transferable from legal, that legal mindset. So it's not as a big disconnect as people first think when I start explaining it to them.
Yeah, definitely. So what you mentioned systems that you were looking at. What sort of systems were they? Was that ERP and CRM, or were they specific law
Yes,
systems?
no, so it was a plethora really. So it would be payment systems for the banks.
Yeah.
Then I moved into a lot of the operational document management, account opening, so bank letters, statements, account opening, online marketing brochureware, and how all of those systems actually produce that collateral for clients and customers at the bank across all of the different directorates, whether that was retail, commercial, insurance, wealth. Um, and then from there, I moved into Dynamics, ERP, CRM, Business Central, essentially the contact center. Um, and then also from that, the other types of CRM systems, so Salesforce and kind of other CRM systems out there. So it's been a wide range of IT systems and applications I've worked from, back in the old on-prem days, moving into the cloud. But my bag for the last 6-7 years has been the Microsoft stack across that Dynamics platform and also into sort of like the Power Automate and the Power Platform space. So yeah, quite a broad
Fantastic.
range.
Yeah, it sounds like you've done so much. So in our previous conversation, you've often said that you're not technical, but you clearly understand a huge amount. Where does that gap come from?
Um, I I think for me, the gap is where how we define technical, right? So
Mm,
when I say I'm not technical, I mean I'm not an engineer. I don't build the solution. So I'm not that developer, I'm not that functional consultant. But I have spent many years, as I've just articulated, working with these tech teams. So I've got super
yeah,
close to them. I understand what they're saying. And actually, I think one of my old IT project managers, who was phenomenal, pulled me aside one day and said, Vikki, can you keep saying you're not technical? You are. You
yeah,
have the technical ability to translate and relay our speak to the business, but you have that ability to go back the other way. So you understand how businesses work, you understand what they're asking for and what they need, and translate that back to us. Um, so I think, yeah, that gap is my own kind of little demon on my shoulder, what I define technical. But now now I do say I'm technical, and then I'll say I'm technical because I have the unique ability to be able to bring two sets of very diverse teams together and translate and show value for both of those teams.
yeah, absolutely. So you describe yourself as a bridge between the business and the tech teams. What does that look like in practice?
Um, Not just about translating the language. I actually think it kind of works both ways, in that I'm also helping both sides show the value, like bring them together with what they're wanting to achieve. So with the business side of things, Sarah, it's kind of telling them and working with them to say, not what it's not what you want, but what do you need? And then we
Mm.
kind of look at that. We don't want to recreate assumptions. And then, to quote one of my current colleagues now, I don't want them to just replace crap with crap, right? But on the other side, it's
Quote
working with
unquote.
tech. Yeah, the other side, it's working with the tech teams to say, the requirements I'm giving you, this isn't just a story and you're just developing it and coding it, but working with them so that they really understand why we want to build it that way, what that need is from the business, so that they really understand the impact on the users and the operational side, and what that brings to the organization and their strategy as a whole. I think where I bring both of those teams together and they look at those decision points, and if we have conversations that I need both parties in, because one is wanting one thing, the tech team is saying, oh, can we do it like that? They need to come together and look at trade-offs and actually say, well, what is right for the business, but that actually is okay with the tech as well, and that we're not compromising that tech too much, for example, and that we're going to introduce more technical debt, but that we don't want to stop the business teams from not being operationally be able to do what they need to. um,
Mm.
so I think it's more, somebody once said, oh, are you just a go-between? And I was like, no, I'm not just a go-between. I'm there to bring and facilitate people together and actually make sure that everybody, business and tech, is solving the same problem, and that we all take responsibility and shared ownership for what that outcome should be.
Mm. That leads me on quite nicely to my next question, which was, have you ever pushed back on a technical team's decision, and what happened?
Um, yeah, several times, Sarah. I've
Quite
done it the
often.
other way as well. I've done it the other way.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I've done it from a technical point of view, because technical teams are often looking for the cleanest way to build something,
Yeah.
the most efficient way from a system perspective. But as I've just touched on, that could actually break how the business want to work, and that it's going to break that process or restrict them from actually being able to operationally do what they need to get the most out of that organization for their end recipient, whether that's clients, suppliers, whoever. Um, so in those sorts of situations, I've had to push back and kind of explain to the technical teams, yeah, if we do it like that, the business is going to end up having to do a lot more workarounds, and that's not going to be great. That is actually going to drive adoption down. People will find other ways to do what they need to do. So I think at times like that, that's where I alluded to in the previous kind of question, I'll bring them together. It's about bringing the two parties together, being really explicit and trying to drive out, well, what is our outcome? What are we both wanting to achieve? And let's look at those kind of trade-offs and what needs to happen. And I think from my perspective, both on the business side, but also in that technical side, Sarah, the technical teams quite like being challenged back and pushed back sometimes. It gets them thinking, it gets them wanting to explore the systems more and think about other ways that they could, rather than just, oh, well, this is just the vanilla solution that system provides. Oh, they've pushed back on this. Well, how can we get around that for them? And I think technical teams, developers strive upon that sort of challenge.
Yeah.
So that, for me, I don't want to sit there and go, yes, I won that argument. It's about actually landing the right outcome for the business and for the tech team, for both parties.
And changing their mindset as well, like you say,
yeah.
rather than it being just an instruction, like this is what could benefit for you, because quite often technical teams can be contractors, can't they? And they're going from project to project. So if they learn a new way with a business that you're in, they can take that to somewhere else, and ultimately that would benefit them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And I also
absolutely.
think a lot of technical teams are quite introverted people, but as I've kind of got
Yeah.
them into those discussions,
Yeah.
we've had that challenge. There's something beautiful about the collaboration that can come out from both the technical mind but the pragmatic business mind, and when they kind of do actually meet in the middle, and it's quite phenomenal to watch.
Yeah.
And it gives both parties a boost, and like you say, they've got experience to take into their next projects, whether that's the next business SME driving something else. They understand the mindset of technical teams, but it allows the technicians, like you say, move on to their next contract and they've got that experience. Or if they're perm, then their next request in from the business, they've already got a mindset shift to be thinking about the user needs, not just the system needs.
Yeah. And there's the benefit as well of getting people in a room, whether that's, via Teams or whatever, when you're actually having a conversation. So obviously emails going back and forth can be misconstrued, can't they? But you actually get people face to face, and you just get so much better outcomes.
Yeah.
So moving on to sort of leading transformation at scale. So you've led huge transformation programs at Lloyds, TSB, PwC, and now the pensions regulator. What's usually the real reason these projects stall?
It's generally not the technology, Sarah.
Without landing anyone in it.
Yeah, it's generally not the technology. For me, my experience is more about misalignment, right? So what people think they've agreed they're doing, they haven't really aligned on the problem they're trying to solve or work out the outcome they want. People see it in different ways. So I've had situations where the business is focusing on their pain today. The tech team, as I've alluded to before, is looking for the cleanest and most vanilla solution. But your leadership team is actually focused on timelines, cost, the value, and those things don't always come in the same direction. They think they are, but in reality they're not. And I think what you start to see is, for a while, on paper and as you're reporting on those kind of initiatives, everything's tickety boo, right? Everybody's, even though they've got different viewpoints, that misalignment doesn't come out. But actually what's happening in reality behind the scenes is friction is starting to happen, and you end up having to revisit decisions the further along you've got, because something comes out, scope will shift, or as you go live, adoption is not, the uptake of it is not as high as you would want it. And that's what then causes the programs, initiatives, pieces of work that you're working on to slow down or stall. But I think the ones that I've worked on and where we've really led from the beginning, and it depends upon who your end client is, right? I've been a contractor, I've been a fixed term employee, permanent employee. But those programs that have worked best is where we've really set the alignment very clearly at the beginning. We've been clear on outcomes, we've brought the right people in, and and we've continuously tested with our users as we're building and iterating before you even if it's you're going to have one big bang, but you're building in an almost an iterative phase to get that. You're testing those assumptions on users as you're going along to make sure it works. So I think misalignment is that biggest thing, and the best piece of advice is it's less about delivery discipline, but more about getting everybody on that same page and making sure they all know that they all genuinely think they're solving the same problem.
Yeah. So I was going to ask you, like, how do you go about doing that then? Is there like a central document that says this is the plan? And that might be broken down into like different sections or something. Yeah. Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I think I'd always have some kickoff sessions with
Yeah.
the key stakeholders from all those representatives, and that includes, in my opinion, I would bring in maybe a tester or a change manager, a trainer into those to really set what is it everybody's wanting to achieve. Then we would document that and make sure everybody has that same vision and they've all signed up to these are the high level things, almost like a charter, your mission. But that's iterative, right? Because then as you're going to go, you need to go into a little bit more detail of bring in more people. That needs to be revisited, whether it's a steerco session with your stakeholder, like the leadership, making sure you have those regular retros and project boards, depending on where you're working and the methodology you're following, but just revisiting that and saying, are we being true to what we've defined? And things can change, right? But then it's about making sure that everybody thinks that change is valid. But it's just about revisiting and communication. I think for me, it's like I said, I would have those regular sessions and make sure we come back to every time as we're moving through, we go back to, does that fit in with the key elements that we've all agreed and signed up to, our scope, our mission of what we're doing? I think if people have that clarity, it kind of helps.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you mentioned about the change management and tests coming in early, because this is something that I hear in almost all of my podcasts. Change management is like the top thing, and then also bringing in tests is another really popular topic as well. But in recruitment at the moment in this market, we are not seeing hardly any of those roles. So it totally baffles me, because you've got these programs that do start without that at the beginning. Or is it that they're trying to use, internal capabilities, perhaps? I don't know how you've kind of experienced it in what you've been doing. Have you come across that?
Yeah, so I've had it both ways,
Yeah,
Sarah. So I think the most successful
yeah,
programs I've worked on is where I have pushed and said, no, I am having
yeah,
a tester or a trainer. And some of these programs and pieces of work that I worked on, it was easier. I was the senior product manager, so head of CRM.
yeah,
It was easier because I had that in my makeup of my resource, that I always had a tester within my pool, within my team, and a trainer. I've had it that some come in later, and I think, yes, people look to use business SMEs, and that's not to say that they don't bring value, because they do 100%, but they're looking at it from a certain different angle. And if they haven't worked with IT systems and implementing transformation, they don't know what they don't know until they've got that experience, right? But I think for me, if you bring testers in and trainers in late, you find problems much later.
hmm
Having them closer at the beginning, and I'm not saying they need to be there 100% of the time at the beginning. It's about flexing it up when you need them, and maybe then flexing them down, and then they kind of pivot back up as you can move into delivery. But I think having them there, testers and trainers at the beginning, when you are looking at your scoping and you're looking at your design phase, they often uncover issues that if they're unearthed later on down the line, are actually more expensive and difficult to fix. I think that they help shape the solution if they're in earlier. They're not just validating it at the end, they're shaping it. I think testers are very good at challenging assumptions. Trainers tell you straight away, no, this is going to be too hard to explain. That doesn't feel intuitive. So I think for me, having them at the beginning actually helps shift that mindset of those two roles and skill sets, which are definitely needed, from being a tick box exercise later on into an influential capability that really helps that design output, and you start to see eventually better adoption, and you have fewer surprises at the end that could potentially stall your go live.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. So what's the hardest mindset shift you've had to take a team through?
Probably from delivering the IT application or system to actually solving the problem. So I think too much at the beginning, teams start out focused on the output. Oh, what can we build? What milestones do we have to hit? Are we going to deliver what was asked for? And they're good at that, right? But for me, with my strategic mindset, it's like, hang on, let's step back. We need to question what we want to build. Is that the right thing? Is that what the business, our users, actually need in the real world? Is this right for the operational aspect of the business? Is this actually meeting the corporate strategy of the organization that you're working for? And I think for me, that kind of mindset shift from let's just do to let's actually look at what are we trying to solve can be really uncomfortable. You're challenging constantly, so you're challenging the requirements of that's what you want, but do you need it? Bringing in users earlier into the conversations with show and tells, that's quite a difficult mindset shift, because sometimes people don't like to be critiqued if a user says it's not going to work, and it's oh well, we've just done all of this, and it's like, no, that's a good thing, right? This is brilliant. And the other thing apart, when you're looking to solve a problem, is sometimes I just need my teams to slow down.
Yeah.
We need to look at, is this right, rather than just going gung-ho, because actually that might be right for now, but 6 months down the line, that could cause us a whopper of a problem because we've been too restrictive. I think when you get the teams to eventually make that shift, and it takes a while, Sarah, we're all creatures of habit, things change. Conversations between all of the areas become more collaborative. It then gets easier to make decisions. It gets easier for those people in the room to push back and challenge and actually say, no, this isn't going to work. And then also you end up with a clear why you're doing it. This is our purpose. This is the problem we're trying to solve. And that then ultimately will create less rework later on. So yeah, I always kind of try to say to teams and people that I'm working with is, are we building it right, or are we just building the right thing? Like we need to move from that mindset.
Yeah, fantastic. So moving on to a discussion around the contract market, which has been slightly challenging of late. You've been pulled into work below your level just because you're capable of it. How do you push back without damaging the relationship?
I think it's less about saying no, right? Oh no, I'm not going to do that, but more about reframing the conversation to where your value is. And I think you're right. As a contractor, it's very common. We get asked just to step into things because we can do them. We're adaptable, we're flexible, we've had to be. We can just drop into clients very quickly. But that's not the best use of the role that you've brought us into. So quite often I've had to push back and say something like, yeah, I'm happy to help here, but let's actually look back. Let's take a step back, and is this where I'm actually going to bring you the most impact and the most value? And it opens up those conversations, and I kind of speak to them and say, look, I don't mind doing something more delivery focused, maybe down a level that I would normally be at, but that comes at a trade-off. And the strategic piece, the alignment, that direction and shaping of where we want to go as an organization, where you want to go as an organization, that is not going to get the attention that it needs, and that it deserves. So I think being open and kind of reframing it to, this is the outcome of what would happen if I do this, and you're going to have, not going to have as much impact and value, actually helps in that conversation. And I think where that what happens is they're then clear where I'm going to add value. I'm clear on, I've said what I'm going to do. I don't mind doing this, but it comes at this trade-off. And I think that actually gives those people that I've had to push back to something to really think about, and they go away, rather than just going in and saying, no, I'm not doing that because that's not my level. That's not going to get the right outcome, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that reframing piece.
Yeah, and educating them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think,
absolutely.
like, early on in my career, Sarah, I would have been, yeah. I'll do that. But then that dilutes your impact, right? That actually doesn't help you, and it doesn't help them in the long run.
Yeah.
But I'm older and wiser now, been around the block a few times, that actually I've learned it's reframing it about impact and having that conversation.
And it's also probably not cost effective for them as well,
No.
because be paying for, a skill set up here and asking them to do something down here, that maybe, getting somebody at that level would be
Yeah.
better for them. So the contract market, I mentioned the contract market's been challenging. It's changed a lot in the recent years. What has sort of shifted for you? I mean, how many years have you been contracting? You mentioned that you were kind of perm, fixed
Been
term as well.
the majority of the time since 2009. I think I've been perm for about 2 years within that period of time.
Right. Yeah.
The rest of it is majority contract, but it's some very lengthy contracts that probably should have been challenged, but we won't go there.
Beep.
Yeah, exactly. Beep.
Okay. So what's kind of changed for you, the contract market throughout that time? Have you seen changes?
Yeah, I think early on in my contract career, it was a bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
Um, Roles were clearer. There was more autonomy and an expectation you were just going to come in and deliver this. Now it feels very complex, and challenging. There's so much more scrutiny around cost. Are you inside, outside IR35? Are you, what's the value for money that you're bringing? And organizations are way more cautious about how they use contractors, not helped with all the constant political changes and then changes that, they've had to adhere to. And I also think roles have become a bit more blurred. So I've found that a lot of the senior roles that I come into have become more blurred, in that you go in one thing, but it could be diluted. And like we've said, you're suddenly strategic, hands-on delivery, going down and fixing problems at other levels, which you shouldn't really be having to do. But that dilutes the impact if it's not managed very well. And I
Yeah.
think it's the other piece is, whereas before, if we take the program management spectrum, so, all the types of roles, testers, BAs, project managers, program managers, back at the beginning of my career, it was very much, you could change sector
Yeah.
very easily. A project manager and a program manager had a certain skill set that were all transferable, and you could move from, say, out of financial services into manufacturing or public sector quite easily. Now that's scrutinized, and it's
Yeah.
scrutinized to an even lower level, that it's not just the sector, it's oh, but we need a dynamics expert.
Yeah.
And now I agree, actually, some of those roles in that program management, super beneficial if you've got a dynamics background, but not all the time. And in the past, they'd have looked at your purest generalist skill set and said, yeah, come and, they've got years of doing that. They're very good at moving around different systems. Here we go. And I think that's reflected in my career, that I managed to move around just so many different IT systems. Yet now it's very much they're looking for your last number of contracts and what system specifically have you worked in on that. So, I love Dynamics and the Power Platform and all of those products. So I'm super grateful. But if I say went for a kind of a contract that was back into those banking platforms, those payment platforms, it wouldn't have mattered that I'd worked for a number of years and led big deliveries on them. It's been a period of time, and they're just looking now. It's very, what is your last 5 years? So it's got very niche.
Definitely.
And I think the other part of, I think now with contracting is you're having to demonstrate your value constantly rather than just do the do. But then I think that the flip side of that is, that's brilliant if you can do it, because if you can show the opportunity of your impact and your value, that makes you stand out in this market where it is a lot tougher. So yeah, I think it's about how you need to know how to position yourself right now and show where you add value, whereas before you could be more of a generalist at a slightly higher level.
Yeah, I think there's a few points, that you've kind of mentioned that I can kind of comment on from a recruitment perspective. Obviously, the way that the economy is, budgets are really tight, and you've got your program managers and your C-suite that are really, really hot on that. So I find when I'm asked for a contractor, sometimes we're asked for two skill sets in one, and it's like, okay, we want a unicorn, fine, but we, in this market, it's actually we can find the unicorns because there are actually quite a lot of people, really, really good people that are out of work and looking for work. So there's that side of it. And I've lost the point that I was going to say now.
I think I could kind of say I agree with that one. The role I've got in now is a bit of a unicorn role. And when they were out looking in the market, they were looking for someone very senior that could deal with C-suite, the board, but that they wanted somebody that also, they didn't specifically state they needed dynamics expertise, but it was desirable. But what came out when they were interviewing other candidates was that either the person had the right level of gravitas to work with very senior stakeholders, but they didn't have too much knowledge of dynamics, which then it become not a desirable but almost an essential, or they had people that were great and obviously sounded like they knew and how to have those conversations, but didn't have the level of expertise at the strategic level. And I think that it took somebody actually really working with my kind of bosses at the regulator at the moment to understand, well, what is it you wanted? And then it was almost like they ripped the job spec up, but did a search then and found me. And first of all, I was like, well, yeah, that does sound me, but I wouldn't necessarily, if that had come across my desk with that title, I wouldn't have necessarily been looking at that title.
Yeah.
And I don't think other people would, I wouldn't have been found. It took going into that unicorn, but there are lots of us. There are a lot of unicorns out there. And it's just about trying to find them.
Yeah, I think there's like that top percent of the market where you've got your unicorns, and then you've kind of got everybody else. But I think just with the way that the market is, that clients are in a very fortunate position that they can get some really, really good talent. It definitely depends on the role. And when you mention about sector as well, they can be very picky with that. So there are some particular sectors that I call it sector racism. There are some which are more kind of sector racist than others. Retail, love people from retail, and they're very sort of, they don't like to veer away from that. And you mentioned manufacturing as well. And I think like I say, it depends on the role. If you're looking for, I've got a functional consultant role at the moment, which is within manufacturing and production. You've got to have that sector experience. But I think at your level, it's less important. Those skills are transferable. obviously, if you do have a manufacturing client and then you've got a candidate with the manufacturing experience, they are likely to veer towards that candidate because they've been in that environment before. But it's very challenging, the contract market at the moment, for
Yeah.
lots of individuals. There are just less opportunities, and the client's wanting more and more from that person. So
Yeah, and I
it's very
think
hard.
I've managed to maneuver my way in. I've been heavily financial services, right?
Yeah.
But I'm now into public sector, but I do think that that period of time at PwC with that consultancy across sector really has helped unlock that kind of bias to bringing
Yes.
people in, because they kind of say, oh, she's been a consultant across,
Yeah.
and that's definitely helped. I think, you know, that role has definitely helped unlock my move. Otherwise, I think I would have been boxed very into financial services, because that's where I, you know, all the different banks and investment banks that I'd worked in. It would have been harder to break out, but that time being brought in at PwC actually helped that slight mindset shift.
Yeah.
We're still trying to unlock some people's perspective, but it's definitely helped in this kind of stickier contract market, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's about building relationships with recruiters as well. Because like,
Mm,
we're having this conversation, and I will be able to sell you in, and with the relationships that I have, and be like, no, the sector experience doesn't matter. This girl's amazing. You need to interview her. So
mm,
I think, and I'm not biased for my own agency. I say to contractors all the time, get yourself out there, make new relationships with recruiters, come on my podcast, get your face
mm,
out there, because I think as a contractor you're also having to promote yourself and your business, and you have to be a lot more visible now than what you used to be. So
100%.
getting yourself out there on LinkedIn, or on Twitter, whatever platform it is that you use, and just giving out knowledge, and just making yourself visible in a contractor market where there are obviously thousands and thousands of people
Mm.
looking for work. um, and I know that you do a lot, and we're going to move on to that in a minute, with sort of giving back and women in tech, which is a huge passion of mine as well. But just a couple more questions around the contractor market. So you've worked with a coach, to rebuild your confidence and your own value. What shifted for you?
Me, it was from talking about my value to actually recognizing it.
Yeah.
Um, I think I alluded to it earlier. I'd often just say yes to things because I could do them, and I thought that's what being valuable meant. Well, if I roll my sleeves up and do everything, I'm, you know, going to be totally sort of like amazing, and they're not going to want to get rid of me the more I say yes. But actually, that isn't where my value is. It's not in doing everything, but it's actually knowing where I make the biggest impact, Sarah.
Mm.
I'm being deliberate about that. I think my coach has been amazing. She's helped me get clearer on how to articulate what I do.
Mhm.
Because as we've already said, my role doesn't fit neatly into a box.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a Jill of all trades at strategic level. I kind of
Yeah.
understand the tech teams. I can program manage, program direct, lead on this, be an SME, but I also have that strategic mindset. So I sometimes would default to underselling myself and be like, oh, I'm just this. Or I'd let other people define what I did. Um, and I think that mindset shift with me in adding, in boosting my confidence, was actually being able to say, no, this is where I add value. This is the level that I operate at. I can be very strategic and join up all those dots. I can see where you need to get to in 5 years' time. I understand your corporate strategy. Maybe we need to challenge it here. But at the same time, I understand how the technical enablement could work, or where there could be a sticky problem, or what potentially could be coming next. So I am a lot clearer in defining, no, this is what I do, and I'm exceptional with my stakeholders. Um, which I used to just think, well, that's just a given, isn't it? Like I'm naturally a good communicator. I've always been that, put me in a room, it doesn't matter. I'll just
Yeah.
used to be like, well, just wing it. That I started to have people say, well, how'd you do this? And I'm like, well, just do it. Um,
Yeah.
so
It's a gift.
So things that just come naturally, I didn't really see that as, well, that's where I'm driving the most impact. That's my value, because that to me was, it was a strength, but it was just a natural trait of mine. Whereas actually you
Yeah.
should be calling them out as that's my impact.
Yeah.
And I think when you actually are very clear on that, people respond better to you. Now I've noticed with that mindset shift,
Mm,
I'm clearer, they're clearer, and I end up in roles where I can actually deliver more value. So I've had these conversations where I'm currently at. The work that I'm starting to do over the next couple of months will be changing slightly because they've recognized where I do bring that value. And I've listened, being just open with them. So I think, yeah, that's where she's been amazing at how, and I think it was just having somebody just reframe it slightly for me,
mm,
and say, well, why do you think that? And why do you believe that? And then when I actually drilled down, I couldn't answer it. It was just a
mm.
perception that I just assumed. Um,
Limiting
so
beliefs,
yeah, so
she
I'm still
calls
a
it.
work in progress, Sarah. There's always things you can work on,
Yeah.
and no doubt, I'll have a bad month and the imposter syndrome and everything will start creeping back in and go, what am I doing? That's just
Mm,
natural, right?
mm.
But I'm much more conscious now of not automatically stepping into things just because I can, and
Yeah.
also much more conscious of going, oh, hang on, I'm going down a rabbit hole. Let's reframe it. Let's reframe that. And what would you say to your mentees? That's the other thing I have. I mentor a lot, so and coach others. So it's then about actually what what is it you'd say to them, and start actually using your own advice, Vikki?
Yeah.
So yeah.
So moving on then to giving back, and you mentioned your mentees, and you do a lot in the tech space for women. You were recently part of the UN UK Women's Commission on the Status of Women. What was that experience like for you?
Real, um, and really grounding at
Yeah.
the same time. So I was suddenly having conversations and being part of conversations that were much bigger than me, much bigger than where I worked, much bigger than just everybody around me. I'm not just looking at systemic challenges. I'm hearing so many other different people's perspectives on gender equality, access, all of that stuff, and hearing how other cultures and countries handle that. I think it was what struck me what struck me most, Sarah, was that the themes were universal. It didn't matter if it was women in tech, it didn't matter if it was women's health, the justice system, wider society. I started to see similar patterns around the confidence, the opportunity or the lack of opportunity, how systems and processes for those things were not designed from a female's perspective. And yes, some countries are striving ahead than others, but there's still so much more to do. And I think it just made me really reflect on what role we have in our own environments, our own surroundings. I don't need to be working at some global UN level to make a difference. It's almost about, well, how do I impact and influence teams around me, how we make decisions, who gets a voice, friends and family, how I can kind of use my voice there, and kind of get out there and really just give back, because like I said, I am vocal and very good at talking. Um, so I just kind of came away with I have an even stronger sense of responsibility to
Yeah.
use my voice, use my motivation to keep pushing for change in different environments that I can control, not necessarily just with like massive big statements, but just everyday little things.
Yeah.
And on a personal level, it was just so inspiring to see people that are so passionate about being committed to making change and to strive to make change.
Mm,
My cohort in this group with the UN UK women were phenomenal. I've met people from walks of life that I would never have come across. And yet now I've got friends for life, and we're
yeah.
looking at little things, and we're all really supportive. They can see my passion for women in tech. I can see their passion for women in different sectors, where they specialize. I met one particular woman who is a legal lecturer for a university and not too far away from me. So I've gone to some of her networking things that she's done about promoting more equality and the justice system. And she's coming to things that I'm doing on women in tech. So we're then cross-learning our own self, but actually then being able to share with our each sectors of people that are in our walks of life what's happening in others. And I think the more you talk about it, and then the regular monthly calls that we have as our cohort, again, just to touch base, it's just so inspiring. And I'm going to carry on working with them, and hopefully I'll get on the cohort for next year as well, because I don't want to go anywhere from that, because change needs to happen.
Yeah. And I think that there has been a lot of change and we've been going in the right direction, but certainly from the conversations that I've had, there's still so much work to do. And I talk about this a lot on my LinkedIn, and I'm pretty sure that people roll their eyes at me like, oh, she's talking about women in tech again and gender equality. And I've actually had some pushback recently from a few females about the things that I do, which only kind of shows more that there needs to be more work to be done there for a mindset shift for so many people.
Yeah,
And
I think when I was talking to the lady from the legal sector and the way she's doing, I think what struck me most was actually in the judiciary at these courts, where you look at the certain levels into the European systems, the judges that are actually these cohorts that are actually the lawmakers for some of this gender equality aren't reflecting that in their actual cohort. And there's one particular court, and I think it's 12 out of the 15 that sit are still male, and I'm like, you're the guys that are pushing for this gender change. You are responsible for making these laws, and actually you're not practicing what you preach. I was like, wow, it was a real stark statistic when I saw it, and was like, wow, there's a lot to do in the legal sector, as much as, and in the judiciary as there is in the tech. The number of females in tech and then the number of females getting into leadership in tech is just even less. You've only got to go and have a look at all the Lovelace report to find all of those statistics. But it's sector agnostic. It's not just limited just to tech. It's out there, and I think that was a real eye opener from my colleague on that UK cohort from that legal and justice perspective.
I think we could do a whole another podcast on that.
I'll
move on to the next question before I take up too much time. But you currently mentor 8 women in tech, which is amazing, by the way. I don't know how you fit that into your working month, but what's a pattern you keep seeing come up with the ladies that you speak with?
I've actually got more than 8 now, Sarah. I'm in double digits. Yeah, but I love it. I think for me, it's underestimating value.
Yeah.
The exact thing that I've worked on with my coach is the same thing that I've seen with my mentees.
Why do we do that? Because we do. It's a female thing.
Right? I think we always need to think we need to be ready before we do something. I need to do X, Y, and Z before my value is really there. They don't put themselves forward for an opportunity. They don't want to back their own point in a room. They'll say, oh, I just do that. Or if we say, oh, you've done a really good job there, we go, oh yeah, I know, but that's just my job.
Yeah.
And it's
really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I've been guilty of that in the past, right? But actually at the same time, I do have a lot of self-worth. So a lot of our conversations, and credit to my coach as well for helping to reframe it.
Because you've worked on that.
Yeah. She's always said, you've got it in spades, but then when you suddenly shrunk yourself as you got into leadership, why? And so she just kind of helped Vikki come back to the old Vikki of kind of in her 20s. But a lot of those conversations are about reframing that with my mentees, helping them say, well, actually, look at the impact you're already making. What is it that you still think you need to learn at this point to not push yourself into the next boundary. You know, we're all going to learn. Life is a learning journey. But I see that tendency a lot. You know, they're just taking it on. They're just saying yes. So I think a big part is just getting them to get that real clear clarity on why and where they add value, and help reframe that mindset, give them the confidence to operate at that level rather than waiting for permission. I had a session with one of my mentees on Monday, and she was having this exact same battle, and she was like, the way you just articulate back to me what I do, I've written it all down. She said, she's at a bit of a crossroads, and she's doing a lot of work for her CTO that's kind of leaving. She's become this, we'll just go to her because she knows it, but she's not getting that visibility at that right level. So I was like, you're not framing yourself right. Even when I'm talking to you, you're very like quiet with me. I can see your shoulders are shrinking in. You need to step back. You need to reposition this. And some of the things, oh no, that sounds like I'm being too confident. And I'm like, it's not. It's about having that self-worth and self-assurance. This is what you do. Now say it. It's okay. And I think when I work with those mentees, and I see them and give them permission in our sessions to give me the confidence. And I noticed that they, you know, because I'm also allowing them to have that confidence and to speak honestly, I noticed that they suddenly relax their shoulders, that they talk to me more openly. And then I'm like, right, bucket this is what you're doing. Why? And they're like, oh, I just feel like you understand me. And I'm like, but you need to still reposition yourself like this out there, and it'll feel awkward at the first few times, but actually you are in charge of your destiny. You know your own self-worth. You know what you're good at. You know where your value is, and you hold yourself to account on that. Your career is your career, and don't let anybody else tell you either way. And I've started to see that shift in some of them. Others are still a work in progress. But when I do, they show up differently, and then they come back to the next mentoring session and they're like, wow, Vic, I did this. Like, this is what happened. And or they'll WhatsApp me, because I'll be like, right, I know you've got that really important meeting today. Did you put the strategy in place that we thought? You know, even if you only did one of those things, that's a win in my opinion. And I appreciate you can't suddenly do everything straight away. And I kind of have those conversations with them and kind of reach out, and watching them have that mindset shift. You know, I've got another mentee. She is now absolutely flying, Sarah, and that gives me so much joy to see somebody realize their potential, realize their worth. You know, she is an incredibly senior BA. She was wanting to move into being a head of business analysis, but at the same time she's got a business on the side where she trains BAs to get the BCS qualifications. And there were a number of things. It was, I don't know how to get into line management because I don't really have anybody to line manage. And I was like, well, there's other ways of doing it, right? You need to reframe and reposition. You've got this business, right? You are managing people there. It's a different capability. Or how about you go and do some talks and what you do, because that is getting you out there. That's increasing that visibility. It's giving you more confidence. And let's reframe that. And now she's just flying. She's out there public speaking everywhere.
Wow,
her
amazing.
business is starting to fly because she's starting to put more of a LinkedIn presence. And that was scary at the beginning. She was, oh, what was if I put something in this negative comments? I went, so what? Like, you just bat the haters away and you focus on, you know, you know your worth. Yeah, you know your worth. And so, yeah, I absolutely love mentoring and coaching.
I can see that when you talk about
tech.
it, you're glowing when you're talking about it.
I mean, I have a couple of males as well. You know, I'm not
good.
just
And
I think, you know, they've come and said, look, you've had a squiggly career, but I also want to see, they also recognize the skill set that women bring. We're much more empathetic than men.
Generally,
we need a legal review for that, but generally we spin so many plates out there outside of work that we're very good at multitasking in the working environment, and we think differently. We bring a different perspective. So they were like, I just want to tap into some of that, and also want to get closer to, so that I can really promote and be an ally for women in tech as well. You know, we don't all want one mindset. So yeah.
I just want to go back to one of the points that you made about women sort of not wanting to kind of speak up, and we kind of just say yes. And I have this problem where I'm like, okay, we just do that. And I can have a problem with setting boundaries. It's something I'm working on with your coach, said coach, shared coach.
Yep.
But there is a statistic, I don't know what that statistic is, I can't remember off the top of my head, that if a man is to be assertive and to set a boundary, it's often really well respected. But if a woman is to do that, they can be seen as cut this word out, but they can be seen as a bitch in the workplace, and they can also be seen as opinionated. And I came across this sort of analogy when I did some training with this coach, and I stepped back and thought, gosh, yeah, how many times are women called opinionated? I never hear a man get called opinionated. So there is that perception, and also from women. Women will view women in that way in the workplace, if we are to sort of stand up for ourselves. And I think that's why a lot of women, and certainly I have in the past, just kind of gone, I just get on with it, and to just say yes. So I don't know if you've come across that kind of within your coaching.
I've come across that. I've had that myself, right? So I've been called bossy. I'm like, and
men don't get called bossy.
Men aren't bossy, they're assertive, or they've got a leadership skill. It's like, so and I've had that, she's such a bitch, and I'm like, why am I? You wouldn't say that about that bloke over there, like. And then again, some of my mentees have come with that. It's a bit like, they kind of feel, but I still go back to, you need to hold your own. You need to know your own self-worth. And I think once you have your own self-worth and really see it and really value yourself, your confidence starts to be, to hell with it. So I've actually called people out now, and I kind of forgot I had done this on a number of occasions until I went to somebody's retirement a couple of weeks ago, and sitting there was an old director I didn't work with, but he sat on the same floor and we knew mutual people, and he had his wife there. And I walked in and he was like, oh, Vikki, I haven't seen you for like, what, 8 years or something, just pre-COVID or something. I was like, yeah, how you doing? And he was like, oh, do you know what, are you still as like real calling people out, really kind of so confident in your own self-ability, like self-worth and ability? And I was like, well, I had a bit of time where I've kind of shrunk myself, but I'm back out there. Like, he was like, don't ever change. He said, because you were brilliant when you had the balls to call people out. He said, I could hear you on the floor. You didn't sit too far away from me. I could hear you when you called certain people out for their misogyny, or them saying, oh, you're just being a bit bossy. You'd be like, well, you wouldn't be saying that if I was a bloke, would you? Things like this. And he was like, he said, I used to really admire. He said, and that's how you really built a lot of your team, the trust and empowerment in your teams, because they knew that you had their back, and actually you weren't afraid to call people out. And I was a bit like, I didn't realize I did it as much as what you said. But it really reminded me, it was like, no, that's a good trait to have. There's a way to do it, Sarah. I'm not like,
it's like what you were saying earlier with reframing.
You need to reframe it.
Yeah, you just need to educate people that actually, no, it's not okay for you to call me that, and this is why. And then sort of, but it's hard in the moment, especially if you're triggered.
And I don't know whether it's, I've had a lot of confidence and still with me from my parents. I credit them with a lot of my self-assurance. But I think I've not been afraid to fail. I've not been afraid to call somebody out. And I don't know if it's because with my background, with my name, with my surname, how I spell my first name, or I've always had to reframe people, go, no, that's not how you spell my surname, it's this. So I don't necessarily feel uncomfortable getting uncomfortable and pointing something out, because I've had to do it, and I've had with a surname like that, why are you here? And not back in Poland.
Oh,
I've had that,
wow.
yeah. And I'm like, well, I was born here. So, so I've
Yeah.
had little bits like that I've had to, which has, I'm not going to lie, sometimes hurt, but at the same time, I'm like, no, I'm calling it out. So I think that confidence and that real ability from my parents that was instilled in me to speak up about something that wasn't right has really come out now, and with my coach as well to help reframe. And I would just say, just don't be afraid. I think the more people speak out, the more we will strive for change.
Yeah.
And change needs to happen. Change is a good thing, but more of it needs to happen. And just don't be afraid.
Yeah, it's really, really inspiring. So, where are you now? Doing the strategic design-led work without being buried in delivery. What does your ideal next role look like?
I think for me, I think I've already alluded to it, somewhere that sits at that intersection, strategy, design, transformation, where I'm influencing decisions early, Sarah, where I'm setting things up so that delivery and that transformation can succeed rather than firefight later and pick up all of that. I really enjoy where I get organizations to take a step back, really challenge what they're doing, what they're wanting to achieve, and align business and tech to come together. So yeah, I think I want something that sits at all of those intersections. I'm kind of probably talking my way into a CTO role, which I think would be amazing. But yeah, I think a role like that, but equally as important to me is the environment. So I need somewhere that is open to challenge, where perspective is valued, and not seen just as a disruption, and that don't just say we want to do this journey and we want to change, but then not actually put the money where their mouth is. I've been in situations where they are striving to change, they want to change, but they don't have the money, or actually the mindset's not right there to do it. But I think, sitting somewhere in one of those intersectionary roles in a great collaborative environment is where I can really make a difference, Sarah. Shaping that thinking, not just executing it, is what I'd probably say.
Yeah. Okay. And you've kind of mentioned that you've been pigeonholed a little bit in terms of industry. Would you like to kind of change industry? Do you thrive in like a fast-paced environment more so, would you say?
I'm open to all industries. I love learning. I love learning about, taking learnings from one industry and taking it to another, and vice versa. I think fast-paced environments really suit me. I think you get quicker feedback when you're working in a faster-paced environment than a slower-paced one. You're able to test, learn, adapt more rapidly in those environments, which for me is really important in your transformation process. You don't have to have all the answers up front. I think in a slower pace environment, you lose some of that. So I'm not discounting the slower paced environments, but I think faster pace suits me. And also I run at 100 miles an hour, have 1,000 tabs open in my brain so I suit a faster pace, because it keeps up with my mind that has all those tabs open, thinking, if we do this, then we can do that, and then we can do this, and it moves on. So I think that's where I would sit more naturally. But I'm open to any sector, because I think I could bring that worth in from that regulated perspective, from that consultancy background, from that finance background. I think there's a lot of learnings that could be cross-skilled across sectors. And sometimes it's good to have somebody that comes in from a completely different sector that hasn't got as much sector experience in that way, because what you bring is a bit more perspective on, you have that step back, like I talk about. You can take that step back and actually challenge, well, what is it that you really want as a need, as opposed to, because that's how we've always done it in this sector. But you can have those challenging conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you had one message for an organization about to start a CRM or ERP transformation, what would it be?
start with the problem, not the system. So I've kind of alluded to that. Don't just say, right, we're going down this route with this particular ERP or CRM system. You need to actually think about, what is it you're trying to solve? What is the outcome you're wanting to achieve? If you get all of that right, then the system is an enabler. CRM or ERP, they're not just a solution in themselves, they are an enabler. If you don't get that thinking and that problem solving done and that design done right up front as to what it is your outcome should be, no technology is going to fix it. I think if you treat the project as this is a CRM project, for example, and you're going to get this, you're just going to get that system at the end. But if you treat it as this is a people and process and transformation change, and tech's the enabler, you might actually get the results that you want.
It's really interesting way. I've not had anyone sort of explain it that way around. I like it. But thank you so much. That's been really inspiring. I feel like warm and humbled from that conversation. Well, definitely warm. I forgot to mention that we've recorded this in the heat wave, so it's like 35 degrees today. I have not even attempted to dry my hair. I've just left it as it is. Normally I'm like, got to dry my hair for the podcast. Like, I'm not bothered.
Yeah, mine's just dried naturally today. I was like, no hairdryer. It's probably going to go up in a bun in a minute because it's so hot.
Yeah, hopefully the fan hasn't like completely distorted this, but I can feel myself going redder and redder. So it's now 11:15, so we're probably gonna give it an end. So thank you to everybody that's tuned in to listen to this amazing episode of D365 Insights. So you can catch us on Spotify, on YouTube, and now also on my website directly. Do give Vikki Szymanski a follow on LinkedIn if you want to learn more about her work, and also follow Source and Connect and Sarah Moody. So thank you so much again, Vikki. That was a great episode, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of a very warm day.
Thanks, Sarah. I really enjoyed it. And I could do more of these podcasts with you.
We'll have to do another one on women in tech for sure.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, thank you. Bye.